Hello everybody, welcome back to Forza Horizon 4 with a Ferrari 812 Superfast that's very, very excited to go sideways. This thing will slide every minute of the day. And that's partially because I don't run many assists. I run manual, no traction control, no stability control, no ABS, none of that stuff. The only thing I don't run with is sim steering and clutch. That's pretty much it. And that means you can chuck things about. But there's also people that run with clutch and run on the most extreme things. There's also people who don't run so much. Hell, I used to run automatic for years until I finally decided to just screw it and get manual because it's faster. Or is it? Probably, but just to make sure and to fuel my curiosity, I wanted to see just how much faster each mode, as you're seeing now, is compared to the other. There's easy, there's hard, there's medium, there's pro, and there's insane. One of those is off, like out of sync, whatever. And I wanted to see which one was fastest. Now, obviously you can pick and choose which ones you want to be and which ones you want to use and whatnot. I don't have the time with that, so I'm going to generalize it just by using those 5 presets, not your custom ones. In order to test this as accurately as possible, I have 3 different vehicles on 3 different types of tracks. I have this BMW that I'm looking at here. This is top of A class, about 400 horsepower, racing tires, rear-wheel drive, pretty standard setup. Then we have a C class front-wheel drive Peugeot 205 Rally. That's going to be much more technical circuits. That one's a bit more power built, sort of, 130 horsepower, and slightly better tires. And then, since this is Horizon, we have a Jeep. This I actually didn't have to do any tuning with from the welcome pack, so it's top of B class. All-wheel drive, mud tires, pretty standard off-road setup. Because, well, how would these settings fare off-road? But we start out with the BMW on tarmac at Lego Island, the raceway. This is a relatively medium spec track. It's got a decent straightaway, some high speed corners, low speed corners, hairpins. It's a pretty good setup all in all to test the average car. And I ran this one here on easy mode, which has assisted braking and assisted steering. And oh dear, it's not fun. I mean, it's hilarious, but you don't really have much control over what your car actually does. You see, it follows the racing line, even though the actual racing line, air quotes, is much closer to the apex. The Forza racing line is a bit off. So you're trying to take a normal apex, but then the brakes enable and get enabled by the AI that's driving your car, which puts you all out of position. And then, once you're all out of position, you try and counter-correct, at which point the game starts taking over the steering because it's like you don't know what you're doing. And then, you end up missing the corner and going into a wall. It's not easy to drive. It's probably the hardest setting I had to learn. I mean, easy mode is probably one of the most difficult driving experiences I've had, just because it takes so much control away from you. It's not even funny. I mean, in the insane mode was difficult, just because I had to learn manual with clutch again, so I did some extra laps of practice for that. Easy mode is even worse, because it takes so much control away from you, you can't actually determine what your car is doing. It's definitely the worst one of the bunch. Pro is closest to what I run with, manual and no ABS, but it does have rewind off, so that's what Pro is. That was pretty much normal for me. And all in all, between Pro, Hard, Medium, and Insane, the difference between driving feel, I mean, the biggest difference for a long time is just automatic, the gears, that's it. So it's not too bad, actually. I mean, my car wasn't the best in terms of tuning, what I did for it, but anyway. It actually isn't too different. You don't notice too much of a difference between Medium, Hard, and Pro. And I didn't notice that much of a difference when it was Insane either. However, if you look at the times, Insane is significantly faster. I mean, Pro, Hard, and Medium are relatively close together. I mean, Pro and Hard are separated by just 1/10 of a second. And then Medium's a second further down the road. Insane, though, is 2/10 of a second faster than the next fastest. That's a significant difference. And I wouldn't exactly call those the greatest laps I've ever done. They're not bad. They're up to standard for this. But, yeah, insane. I don't know if it's the manual with clutch or the sim steering's just smoother or something when you actually take it sensibly, or what, but it was a lot faster. It was noticeably faster. And everything was noticeably faster than easy, which was 2 seconds slower than the next slowest setting. Who would have thought a robot controlling your car while you're trying to wrestle control of it is not the fastest idea? Which brings us on to the C-Class Peugeot. Now this is a very technical course. There's one straight issue way you maybe, even S2 class cars on this road barely get over 130. So, it's not very speed orientated. That being said, it does have a lot of flat out corners, where you have to test your high speed or relative high speed grip. So you're constantly on it, so it's very different than the BMW run. It's also C-Class front wheel drive, so it has, a quarter of the power, and the drive is in a different area. And also the Peugeot 205 Rally is frickin' amazing handling. Good God, all of these cars are very good handling. Well, except the Jeep, we'll get to that later. The point is, I thought this would be a little bit closer, because the track is a bit more flowing, there's less braking points, you're flat out more. I thought these times would be a lot closer just by the nature of you're on the gas more, you're turning less. I was wrong. What you're looking at here is a comparison between the easy setting and the insane setting. Easy is white, insane is red. And, well, the time difference is rather dramatic. Yeah, easy is obviously going to be way early on the brakes, you're not carrying much speed. The difference, though, the reason why easy is so much slower, is because it doesn't, unlike the BMW, which had the power to, kick itself out of third gear, the Peugeot doesn't have that at all. It has about 130 horsepower, which is good for C-Class, it gets it going nice and proper, but it's not enough so that when you're in third gear at 3,000 RPM and you're accelerating out because of the automatic transmission and the nanny AI systems, it can't really move. It does tend to struggle quite a bit on the get going aspect. Once again, the other three, medium, hard, and pro, are relatively similar, although not as similar as the BMWs run on the normal track. It seems that when you're on a tight, twisty course, even though you're using less of your brakes, since you're carrying more speed, you're on the throttle more, and the automatic transmission refuses to shift at the red line, it's actually a bigger difference. You will notice a substantial gap between hard and pro. If you look at the times for the Peugeot, it's over half a second, it's 0.7 of a second faster, and the only discernible difference between hard and pro is the gearbox. It goes from automatic to manual. That is a massive jump, and in fact, the gap between manual and manual with clutch, which was pretty apparent with the BMW, is zilch. With the Peugeot, just 1/10 of a second is practically nothing. So, apparently, the track, maybe if you go to Ambleside, you might get different results. Obviously you're getting different results for every track, but I'm not testing this on every single track, that would be stupid, so I just tested a variety. Maybe if you go to Ambleside, you would get different gaps between the times, but honestly, if you're on a relatively flat-out track like this, the more you're flat out, the worse the hard to easy times are going to be, simply because of that automatic gearbox. While the Pro and the Insane, well, they're pretty much identical because you're shifting in the exact same points and you're downshifting the exact same points and you're carrying a lot of speed. Which brings us on to the Jeep. This is, again, B-Class all-wheel drive, off-road racing tires, pretty sensible. Not the most scientific test on the planet, simply because I try to make it as even as possible, but you can only do so much when you're getting bounced around like mad, and you never know when you're going to hit a jump and it's going to spiral you off into one direction, you're going to hit a lamp post and it'll stop all your momentum, or you'll hit the water weird and it'll spin you out, or anything like that. I try to get the most even course as possible without having crazy jumps that would potentially vary the results. This thing has lots of small jumps, which is more manageable, so... Is it really the most scientific? No, but it might give us a relatively good benchmark, and, the benchmark is... Easy is once again awful. However, after that, everything is pretty much the same. I didn't notice any discernible difference between either lap times or feeling behind the wheel in regarding medium, hard, pro, or insane. They all felt pretty much the same. They didn't vary too much. I think that's just because of the variety of the bumps. You can get tossed around so much, you would have to rip the handbrake one time, you have to, shift down at different points based on how much you land and what your speed is. It's just so varied that the difficulty level of your assists don't really make a difference. Now, if you're looking at the times that are showing up here and you're a little confused, looking at the times and then looking back to my previous statements and wondering how the hell are you saying they're all the same when the hards went almost 2 seconds a lap faster than everything else, well, that is because that was a god tier lap, I'm pretty sure. Everything else was pretty much constant, separated by 0.2 of a second, and then there's hards, which got extremely lucky in every single category. It didn't hit any scenery, it didn't hit any water the wrong way, it got very good landings, it didn't get bounced around, it didn't roll over. It was pretty much the Goldilocks lap, which is why it's 2 seconds faster than literally everything else, and 4 seconds faster than everything else. Actually, 6 seconds faster than easy, if I'm gonna be honest. 6 seconds faster. That's a lot. But if you exclude that outlier of a lap, everything else is pretty much identical. You're separated by 0.2 of a second for most of your pack. There's no discernible difference. So, conclusions-wise, obviously, the less assists you run, the faster you're gonna be. But to be honest, I was expecting a bigger gap. Yes, in the BMW, which is probably the most accurate sample size, there is a second a lap difference between medium and insane. But between each individual tier, it's not actually all that crazy. It's not as big of a gap as I would have thought. So, depending on the driver, depending on the car that you're running in this, say, an open multiplayer lobby, you can run assists and still be semi-competitive with your average Forza player. That's not the result I was expecting. I was expecting you to have to drive, the insane setting or the pro setting to get any sort of lap speed, but they're simply not as far away as I would have thought. I mean, and on the off-road sections, they're pretty much identical. Now, does that mean I would recommend running insane? Not really, because I don't like having to deal with the clutch, and the sim steering can be quite snappy if you get it messed up, but it's not bad in a racing scenario, if you get what I mean. It's a bit snappy, it's a bit more tinkery, that's a technical phrase, with the buttons, but it's not slow. It's the fastest or second fastest in every single event, pretty much. And, yeah. Just don't run easy mode and you'll do pretty darn well, regardless of what you're doing. Yeah, if you run braking assist and steering assist, you're just an idiot. I'm sorry to say that, but you're an idiot. I wouldn't even recommend that to a novice player, because a 4-year-old could figure out how to drive this game, and he wouldn't have to use those settings. So please, for the love of God, never use those unless you're doing a specific challenge or a joke. But anyway, that is going to be it for this episode of Forza Horizon 4. We'll be back with more